Welcome to the VOPCast, brought to you by Banfico. In this series, we explore the key challenges and opportunities in staying compliant with the upcoming instant payment regulation, with a special focus on verification of payee and how banks can go beyond compliance to proactively reduce fraud, protect their customers, and build trust.
Hi, welcome. This is Kannan from Banfico. I'm the CEO at Banfico, but also sit in some of the working groups related to VOP scheme, in Payment Council, Payment Security Support Group, and also some of the VOP Market Working Group. In this conversation, we'll discuss about the role of eIDAS in the VOP API security framework. And I have a fellow expert or an eIDAS expert from InfoCert, Luigi. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Luigi Rizzo and I work in InfoCert, that is an Italian qualified trust service provider, very active in EU, but also outside the EU, and quite expert concerning qualified certificates and cooperating in ESI technical committee in ETSI, specifically cooperated in drafting the document TS 119495 that specifies policies and profiles for PSD2 and open finance certificates.
Thank you. Luigi, it was I first met you in the PSD2 days when we were talking about TS 119495, and yourself and a couple of other QTSP presented to the whole market how this TS 119495 will solve the challenges. It was good to meet you, and they're good to keep in touch for a long time. And we're also partners in the eIDAS and open banking side of things. Today on the VOP verification of payee implementation, or the requirement is from the instant payment regulation, which requires PSP to do a verification of payee, which means checking whether the IBAN matches the account holder, the real account holder. EPC is the scheme operator to run the verification of payee for pan-European entities. And they have published a lot of, API security framework, and where they mention eIDAS certificate. Based on the wide usage and standards that was available, they decided to use PSD2 certificate, QWAC certificate for authentication of the requester. And that's where it all started, and the responder could go and use their own EV certificate. It's just the requirement on the requester to identify themselves. Maybe you could just give us, what is this TS 119495 standards and how it was used in PSD2, and is there an extension? Maybe you can give us a bit more information on those things. It will be good to discover the facts from you.
Yes, this document was drafted by ETSI, specifically by the technical committee ESI, some years ago in 2018, probably the first release, if I remember well, and was also drafted with the cooperation of ABA and some of the national competent authorities of European member states. And at the beginning was specifically fought for PSD2 certificates. In this document, the policies for issuing certificates were specified, and also the profiles of the certificates. Above all, with particular attention to the roles that can be included in such certificates, and that represents the authorizations of the certificate holder. In this moment, there are 4 roles that are defined, that are account information, payment initiation, SPSP, and card issuance, in addition to the unspecified role that until now was not used. Then this document was evolved and became for open finance instead of only for PSD2 transactions. And now it defines certificate profiles that can be issued to non-EU legal entities like banks or TPPs.
But it's good to know the extension that you said. In the EPC, of course, the industry needed time to change some of this. And what we felt, or at least EPC felt at that time, is it's too late to make those changes and observe those changes. So we are still, stuck with the PSD2 roles in the eIDAS certificates, which doesn't tell the certificate can be used only for VOP or not. So, and we have problem with that. When I say problem is we are a RVM, and when 90% of the banks in the market will use an RVM like Banfico. RVM is routing verification mechanism. And we ask the banks to say, give us your certificate, your PSD2 eIDAS certificate, and then we can represent you to make a transaction with the other bank, or other PSP. And what we are now facing is a little bit of a reluctance from the banking community to share that kind of a certificate. And maybe you can tell us, what is the power of the certificate and why are the banks a bit worried about giving this certificate?
As I said, at this moment, there are these 4 roles that are defined and are currently used all over EU member states for these transactions. Then it is needed in this moment using a QWAC including at least one of these roles. And probably if the certificate has to be used by another entity than the bank that is the holder of the certificate, probably the best choice is to include only the account information role, because it is, let's say, the less sensitive between all the possible roles.
But there is a conversation that we are having, so it might be allowed to have unspecified as well. There is the TS 119495 allows unspecified. So the scheme thinks that, I don't know if it's still, confirmed, but the scheme thinks that we can still use unspecified rather than declaring any role. So we do have some kind of a pragmatic compromise, if I would say.
Yeah, but the main problem that I see using a unspecified role is about the usage of this role at this moment. I don't think that until now this role has ever been used. So there is a risk that the validation applications are not ready to manage this role, while the other roles are surely used, and so that all the validation applications are able to manage these other roles.
Yeah, but one thing to add, at least we have gone through the conformance testing and validation with the EPC. For that, we used to check the role of the incoming certificate, and we were asked to relax that condition. But that's more like an authorization check. So we are using more of an identity check using eIDAS, but then we are pulling up the national authority authorization number and then cross-checking this with the EPC directory service, eIDAS, and checking whether the authorization exists. So it's more like do the authentication or identification using eIDAS certificate, but use the eIDAS for more of an authorization check whether this PSP is a participant of the scheme and they have a role in the directory service. And with that, we are able to, at least get some kind of a pragmatic security about getting this VOP implementation move forward. There have been a lot of conversations on this, but let's see how that goes. I'm also keen to explore, you've been talking to some of the non-European countries. All the SEPA countries could participate in the VOP scheme. And we keep hearing that non-EU countries cannot get an eIDAS certificate and things. And maybe you can add more information on this because we had been working with some of the central banks, candidate countries. Maybe you can share your view on that.
Yes, a legal entity that is registered outside an EU member state can request to a European QTSP a qualified certificate, in this case a QWAC. Then obviously the QTSP has to complete the identification of the requester according to Article 24 of eIDAS. And after that, as I said, the 495 document is already created so that it can be used for open finance. So can include attributes and information that are collected outside the EU member state, for example, from the register of a national competent authority in Georgia or in Albania. And so this is now possible according to 119415 policies and profiles. And so a bank that is registered outside the EU member state can request a QWAC with a particular role that could be unspecified, account information, or another role that will be defined in the future specifically for transactions.
Okay, good. Good to know all that, because the VOP scheme is probably going to expand and get international as well. And I think some of this capabilities will help the community immensely. And just to recap, we are using PSD2 eIDAS, which kind of we are using because of the time constraint, but you're saying this certificate can be expanded for open finance use case. So which requires some kind of changes, not now when EPC thinks that they want to use open finance compliant TS 119495, then it will be a lot more appropriate, I would say, rather than the practical limitations that we face. And I think maybe one point I want to say is, generally, how long does an eIDAS certificate take?
Usually, some days are needed to issue the certificate, and mainly depends by the correctness of the information that are provided. If all the information is provided correctly at first request, then a couple of days the certificate may be issued. We shall consider that the QWAC is a certificate issued to a website, and so there is the need, according to CA Browser Forum requirements, to validate the domain that is included in the QWAC, even if the QWAC at the end is used for authenticating to another service. But in any case, the specification of the QWAC is that a domain should be validated, and so to the time that is needed to validate the domain,
I see.
We can go from 4 days to 5 or 6 days in order to issue this.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think I wanted to quote our partnership. In our partnership, we kind of try to minimize all this manual errors or incomplete informations in the application pack. So we created a partnership between our teams, so we could help to curate the application and then send it to you. And our platform can also do the video ID of the legal representative. So I think what we have done with our partnership is we have brought the certificate issuance to 2 days. That's the shortest you could get in a practical way. Otherwise, people send paperwork, yes, and it's right and wrong, and book an appointment for the video, and then if something is not correct, you have to go back. And what we have seen in those situations was it was taking 2 to 4 weeks as well because of back and forth of emails. But anyway, that was a good job we did together. And we have been using that for helping some of the PSP to get eIDAS certificates. So hope we continue our partnership. And thank you for your time today. And it was great to catch up with you and talk about the ever exciting VOP. Not ever exciting, at least for a year it will be exciting. Let's see what happens after that. Probably after that we will talk about FIDA and open finance and PSD3. Back to those days. Thank you, Luigi.
Thank you for this possibility. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the VOPcast. For more information or to schedule a demo, contact our experts at VOP@banfico.com. Don't miss the next episode. We'll be back with more insights to help you meet the October deadline.